Hey guys, Excalibur here, and welcome back to the Flight Animation Blueprint tutorial series. Today, in this video, I will be showing you how to set up the aim offset. I can show you what it'll look like when we finish. So when you're in flight, and depending on what direction you look, your character will face that direction, as well as when you go to move, your character will blend into that space, into that direction. So if you're 180 degrees around, you'll actually turn into that direction. So we'll get right into this. I have my third person project set up. I'll just go into the tutorial test environment that we created. And the first thing we need to do is do a little bit of cleanup on our blueprints. So the first thing we'll clean up is the animation blueprint. So if we go into it, and we want to go into our anim graph, and inside of the locomotion state machine we have the AFL flight movement 2D. What we want to do is create a new state machine inside of this, and we're going to call this flight. That way, so when we transfer into this state, we will have a new state machine filled with all of our animations for flight only. So we don't have to worry about making the graph out here with the third person animations too big. So if we open this up, the first part that we're going to do is find our flight blend space. So we'll go to AFL, hover, flight movement 2D. Just drag it in, and from the entry, open it up, and we want to connect our direction and speed like we had set up before. Compile, and you can get rid of this. And also, I'm going to rename this to flight locomotion state. I'll save, and if you go to test it, your character can now move as normal. Alright. Now we need to go into our character blueprint. We have a few adjustments to make there. So if you open up the AFL player BP, we are going to set up a few components underneath the AFL BP self. So when you select that, in the details, you want to search for control, and all of these control rotations, pitch, yaw, and roll, we want to set all of them to false. So uncheck yaw. We don't need that anymore because we will have the character be blending into the specific movement direction that the camera is facing. And then go to your character movement under the details panel. You want to find use controller desired rotation and make sure that's set to false as well. So now the character in the camera will act like your third person player blueprint, where when you look around, you'll notice that the character flies oddly. I'm just pressing the W key and he is flying forward, but he won't change his direction. So we're going to fix that with a couple different adjustments. So under the character movement as well, we want to search for the flight, the braking, deceleration flying. We want to change the speed. I set mine to 500 just so when you stop pressing the W key, he returns back to the hover state much more quickly than before. So this will also help allow for starting and stopping animations to work better, which we will be setting up later. Alright. What we need to do now is set up our aim offset. So I'm going to put mine inside the AFL BP folder, and right click under animation. We want to choose aim offset, not the one-dimensional. We want a two-dimensional aim offset. And remember to select the skeleton that is your flight locomotion or flight animation blueprint skeleton. And we're going to name this to AFL hover look direction AO for aim offset. And open it up, and now we can set up the look directions. So first we need to set up our axis settings. So if we open both of these up, our horizontal axis we will set to yaw with a minimum of -90 and a maximum of 90 degrees. And for the vertical, we want to use pitch, and we'll set that to -90 and 90 as well. Now in the asset browser, we want to search for the AFL hover idle. And we want to use that as the preview base pose, the additive settings. Okay. Now, one thing we need to set up is our look directions. We want to set those up as the additive poses. So if we go and search for one of them, look down. You see in the additive settings over in the asset details, we need to change that to mesh space and select animation frame. And if we look for the hover idle, we want to set that to the anime. Hold on. Sorry about that. There we go. You want to set it to the AFL hover. Make sure it's on selected animation frame, and the animation is the AFL hover idle, just so they know that they can blend back and forth between each other. I'm going to search. If you press the magnifying glass, it'll search for it in the content browser. So later what you can do is just press the arrow to use the selected asset in the content browser, so you don't have to worry about dragging it every time. So now what we need to do is do that for all of our look directions. So we go to forward pose, mesh space, animation frame, use the AFL hover. Left, same thing. Just double click and open each one up. Oops. Animation frame, use the But what this will do is help it. This basically tells the hover idle animation when we are flying that we are allowed to blend between all of these animations when we use the mouse to look in the different directions. Alright. So now we can go back into our hover look direction, aim offset. Let's just make sure we save all. And now we want to set up all of our poses in the specific areas, in the specific locations. So in the middle row, we'll drag the forward pose, the left pose, and the right pose. So now our character can look left and right. Now we want to do the left down pose on the left side and the left up pose up on the top. So now when we look left, we can look up and down as well. So same thing, right down, right up. Oops. No, didn't set that one up. Yeah, make sure you have all of them set up properly. Because when you drag the animation onto the graph, if it turns red, then it means the animation does not have the additive settings set up properly. So make sure you go through all of those animations. So same thing, right up, and down. So now if you press shift and just move your mouse around, you can see the character looks in a full from 90 degrees from left to right, up, down, and all three axes. So we can save and close that. Now we want to set this up inside of our AFL and BP. So first thing we need to do is actually get the pitch and the yaw. So inside of our event graph, we want to make a few more variables. We want to make 3 more. They're all floats. First one we'll do it is pitch. We need one yaw and time. So we want to set time as the first thing we do. So from event blueprint, update animation, connect it to time, and then connect that to isValid, and the delta time x, set it to time. Okay, so we'll add a new sequence pin, and down in some free space, we will set up our pitch and our yaw. So we want to, from the cast2 player BP, as the AFL player blueprint, we want to get the controller rotation and the actor rotation. And we're going to use both of those to get the yaw and the pitch. So from both of those, drag off from one, and we want to create a rotator out of both of those. Connect it to A and B. Now we can get our pitch and our yaw. And from these we're going to make a new rotator. And we want to make sure pitch is set to Y and yaw is set to Z. And we can take that one off. We don't need the roll. We want to reinterpolate it, make sure that the delta rotator is set up to the target and the make rotator is set up to the current, because we're going to be using those to get our pitch and yaw and set them to the actual values that we can use for our camera direction. And bring out the time and set it to delta time. Now we need to break this rotator, because now that we have all of the directions set up, we're going to break it and then set the pitch and yaw to the current camera direction. So from the Y pitch, we want to clamp our angle between -90 and 90. We'll be able to use that later to add in turning animations for 180-degree turns and 90-degree turns, depending on how far the camera gets. Bring out our yaw and our pitch. And you can see from the Y, we have a pitch. Return value, set that to pitch. And then for the yaw, we want to clamp the angle again to -90 and 90 degrees. And set that to the yaw. Connect them, and then bring this back into the sequence. I'm going to make a new reroute node. And there we have our yaw and pitch set up. So I'm going to comment this and do set yaw and pitch values. Alright, now we can go inside of our anim graph, and we want to back out to the opening state machine area. So the first thing we need to do inside of our anim slot manager, we want to create a new slot, and we're going to call this our full body. break this off. We're going to save this to a cache, a new saved cache pose. I'm going to just call this locomotion, so we can use this state, anything in this state, and blend it with other animations. So get cache, use the cache pose locomotion. And with this, we want to blend it with our hover look direction that we just made. So in the asset browser, search for AFL hover look direction, and the aim offset, drag and drop it. And we want to blend, we want to use the base pose locomotion to blend with the AFL look direction. And you can set the yaw and the pitch values that we created in the event graph. Now, one thing we need to make sure we do is when we want this to be activated, we want our character to be flying. If our character is on the ground, we don't want to use this aim offset. Instead, we could use a different one. So say you have an aim offset for when your character is running, then you would have to set up another one to blend the poses by bool. So take is flying and drop it in. So if our character is flying is set to true, we will use this aim offset blend space, aim offset that we created, to blend with the locomotion. Our false pose is just going to be our cache pose locomotion. So if you had another aim offset for your character on the ground, you would set that up down here the same way this is set up. Alright, now I want to set this to the slot. Just use the default slot, and over in the details panel, do the drop down and select full body, and connect that with the final animation pose. So now if you play the game, your character, when in flight, will look in the direction that the camera is going. So next thing we need to set up is our move direction to have the character, when they are looking backwards, they will rotate around into that direction. Alright, so to rotate our character into the direction that the camera is facing when moving, we need to go into our AFL player BP and find some extra space because we're going to be creating a new event tick function. So right click and search for event tick, add that event in, and off of this, create a new sequence. This will just be for cleanliness later when we have more functions that need to be checked at runtime. So bring out character movement, and from this we want to get velocity, because the velocity determines if the character is moving or not. And to find out if it is, we want to find the length of our vector. So search vector length, and if this value is at any time greater than 0, not greater than or equal to. You can do greater than or equal to if you do greater than or equal to 1, but if it's at any time greater than 0, our character is moving. So connect this to a branch, connect the sequence, and off of the character movement, search for use control, set use controller desired rotation. So if our character is moving, this will be set to true. And if it's false, we'll set it to false. So this is basically saying if our character is not moving, our character will stay facing forward, and as they turn, we will be using our aim offset. However, if they are moving, depending on what direction they're looking, our character will rotate towards that direction that we need. So if you compile, save, make sure to connect the character movement to both of those. So now you can compile and save, and you hit play. Our character, we look in the direction, and now when we move, they rotate to face the direction of the camera. So if you rotate 180, it actually looks like they blend the animations together properly, even when looking upwards and downwards. So that ends this tutorial. The next tutorial will be for sprinting and supersonic speeds for flight. I'll see you back here, and thanks for watching.